Hi, I'm Paul Fox, former chair of the British Wheel of Yoga and author of the book Yoga Quest. In this video, we're looking at the three-part breath, and we're going to look at it in two ways. One is a dynamic version, and the other is a more relaxed restorative version. They'll both help to increase lung capacity, and they'll both help to develop and strengthen breathing muscles. So they're good for everybody. They're good for yoga practitioners. It's good for health. It assists with good posture. There's some evidence to suggest that it's also particularly good for people with breathing difficulties, particularly something like asthma, where if you have more lung capacity, then you're less likely to feel that shortness of breath. So let's begin just by understanding a little bit about the breath, and then we'll move on to practicing the three-part breath. So we're going to look at dynamic three-part breath first. And if we think about the main breathing muscle in the body, which is the diaphragm, it's a big dome-shaped muscle that goes under the floating ribs, the lower rib cage. It domes up and it creates a separation between the abdominal contents and the lungs and the chest above. So it's shaped like a dome, but that shape changes as you breathe in and as you breathe out. So this shallow dome is the in-breath, and this slightly steeper dome is the out-breath. And if we just think of that, it makes sense. So if the muscle is dome-shaped and its muscle fibers run like this, a bit like an umbrella, when they contract, the umbrella shape flattens down. As it flattens down, it's going to move downwards and it's going to create more space above it. So the action of the diaphragm as it contracts on an inhale is to pull down on the base of the lungs and to create more space in the chest cavity so that air rushes into the body. As you exhale and the air moves out, then the diaphragm can relax and move back up. It's a great big muscle. It's a really important muscle. It's the main muscle of breathing, and when you are just at rest or working or in your normal daily activities, that is the muscle that's doing 90% of the breathing for you. You do have other breathing muscles which a lot of people are very familiar with. So between each rib, you have the intercostal muscles. And these muscles run like this between the ribs. These are the external intercostals. As they contract, they lift the rib cage and they create more space in the chest for even more air to come into the body. And if you are doing sport or you're running or you're just needing a lot of physical activity and you need to breathe in and out very rapidly, you also have some internal intercostal muscles which can pull the rib cage back towards each other. So external intercostals pull the ribs, separate the two sides of the rib cage away from each other and lift it, creating more capacity within, and the internal intercostals pull the ribs back in towards the body, and that forces the air out. You can imagine that if those muscles are working in harmony with each other in a rhythmic way, you're going to have the chest acting like a really efficient pump, expanding, contracting, pulling air in and pushing air out. At the same time, the diaphragm is going to be working. And then the final part in this equation are some neck muscles. Got the head up here. We've got some neck muscles, scalenus and other neck muscles that come down, and they're called accessory muscles to breathing, because when you do a really, really big inhale, the last thing you feel is the collarbones lifting, and that's when your neck muscles are just lifting the top of the ribs, top of the collarbones to get that extra little bit of air into the top of the lungs. Okay, so we'll do the 3-part breath now. And there is one more little bit of theory, which is about the diaphragm when we're doing dynamic 3-part breath. So if you just sit comfortably in a chair, cross-legged, kneeling, whatever is comfortable for you, sit on a block or a meditation cushion as I am, or anything you like. When you're in your seated posture, you need to find a neutral spine, so the head is stacked over the heart is stacked over the pelvis, everything's lined up. You're not slumped. You're never going to do a big 3-part breath if the spine is rounded. So when we're sitting nice and tall, in order to support and maintain this posture, there will be just a little bit of drawing in of the lower abdomen. So you'll feel your core is engaged. And what that creates is what I'm going to call a sense of stability in the lower abdomen. So if you press your fingertips in that zone between the tummy button and the pubic bone, it feels quite strong and supported. But the whole of your tummy isn't rigid. Up here above the navel, before you get to the ribs, is still soft. And what that does, it means that when you breathe in and your diaphragm goes from a high dome shape to a flattening shape, it's going to push downwards. But because you've got a little bit of your core stability engaged, the diaphragm is going to meet some resistance. So what it does, it pushes out the lower ribs. So the diaphragm is tucking right up under these lower ribs. They're floating ribs, they're connected by costal cartilage to the rib cage. They're very, very movable, and the diaphragm is very happy to expand your lung capacity and your ability to take a deep breath by pushing the lower ribs out. Equally, in a minute we'll see when we do the restorative, it can work in another way. It can push down and push the tummy out. We don't really want our tummy coming in and out when we're standing up or sitting up, because it's going to destabilize the lower back and it's not good for posture. So for the dynamic 3-part breath, we'll keep the lower abdomen in and we'll allow that diaphragm to really expand and contract the lower ribs. I'd like you just to feel that now. So if you place your fingertips on the lower ribs at the side and engage that little bit of stillness below the tummy button, as you breathe in, you'll feel this area expanding, and as you breathe out, you'll feel it move back in, and you're feeling the movement of the diaphragm, the big dome-shaped muscle pushing the lower rib cage out on inhale and allowing those ribs to move back in towards the midline of the body on exhale. So a lot of people in yoga are a little bit unfamiliar with this way in which the diaphragm works in 2 ways. So it's good to understand that, because it really makes the 3-part breath make more sense. So let's move up now. We've understood what we want the diaphragm to do. Let's work on the external intercostal muscles. So the hands are just coming up a little bit higher from the lower ribs to the main part of the ribs. If you can take your hands to the side, even better. So as you begin to breathe in, be aware of the lower ribs being pushed out by the diaphragm. And as you continue to breathe in, notice the moment when the rib cage starts to lift and widen up here. And you can feel your external intercostal muscles kicking in. And as you exhale, the weight of the rib cage just sinks back in. So the internal intercostals are not really involved in the exhale here. It's a passive exhale. But if we were breathing fast for a particular reason, or a Bhastrika breath indeed, then we'd be using them. But we're not at the moment. And then thirdly and finally, place the fingertips on the collarbones. And as you begin to breathe in, be aware of the lower ribs being pushed out. Be aware of the main part of the rib cage lifting as the external intercostals kick in. And right at the end of the inhale, be aware of the top of the ribs and the collarbones just lifting a little bit. It's a subtle movement. And as you exhale, they're going to sink down first, and then the main part of the ribs will come in, and the lower ribs, the floating ribs, will come in as well. So here we are. We're going to put that all together. So you can either just carry on watching the screen. There's not going to be much to see. It would be more useful if you closed your eyes and just try to experience these sensations in the body. So on the next inhale, try to feel the lower ribs moving out. Still inhaling, feeling the upper rib cage lifting with the external intercostals. And finishing that inhale, feel yourself growing a little as the collarbones lift just a tiny bit. And as you exhale, let that be a real release, a softening, collarbones release, ribs move in, lower ribs move in. If you close your eyes and really focus on what you're sensing in your breathing muscles, then very quickly you will be able to distinguish between those three parts of the inhale: the diaphragmatic breath in the lower ribs, the intercostal breath in the upper rib cage, and the clavicular breath using some neck muscles right at the top of the lungs and the top of the rib cage. Take 3 more breaths in your own time, filling the first part, the lower lungs, the second part, the mid part of the lungs, and the third part, the very top of the lungs. And as you exhale, releasing those parts in turn. You might want to experiment with the visualization of filling base, middle, top on inhale, and then exhaling top, middle, base. Or you might want to think about breathing in from the top down to the base, but still using those breathing muscles in that sequence, and exhaling in the other direction. Just experiment with that. Some people can really extend their breath more with a base to top or a top to base, depending on how their mind visualizes that work. The lungs don't have these 3 sections, obviously, so what we're doing is really using a simple visualization technique of dividing in our mind the 3 sections of the lungs and the 3 ways in which the breathing muscles work, in order to create some more space within which to take a much longer inhale, which will flow into a much longer exhale. So, if we move on and do the restorative, or what is also known as the relaxing 3-part breath, when we're lying down like this, the weight of the body is pressing down on the ribs and is slightly immobilizing their movement. So the work of the intercostals and the ability of the diaphragm to push out the lower ribs is going to be reduced. But in any case, that doesn't really matter, because we're lying down now, so we can allow our stomach to relax. We can disengage from most of the core work we've been doing. And now we can feel the diaphragm working in its other way. So if we place the hands on the belly as we breathe in, we feel the hands lifting, and as we breathe out, we feel the hands sinking down. Now, you don't have any lungs down here in the tummy, so what we're seeing here is movement in the belly that is as a result of the movement of the diaphragm up here under the rib cage. So as that diaphragm pushes down and becomes from a steep dome to a flat dome, it pushes down into the abdominal contents, and this area of the body can change shape but not volume. So as it's pushed down, that volume has to go somewhere. So it manifests itself in the tummy being pushed up into the air. And as you exhale, the diaphragm moves back up, so the contents of the abdomen are able to relax back down. Now, this is an important area around the navel in terms of energy and also emotional security. So relaxing this area and allowing the belly to move and really enjoying this version of the three-part breath can be very restorative and very healing. So we're just going to rest the hands beside the body because we know what we're doing now. So part 1 of the inhale, we're going to feel the tummy rise. Part 2, we are going to still feel a little bit of lift in the rib cage, knowing that that will be restricted. And part 3 will be a slight lifting of the collarbones. Because we're lying down also, the breath can be even slower, and it's taking on a more meditative and relaxing quality. So let's do some breaths now. Breathing in, feel the tummy rise. Still breathing in, feel the ribs widen. Still breathing in, feel yourself fill the lungs right up to the top under the collarbones. And then exhale and relax. Allow yourself to do 2 or 3 more breaths, closing the eyes so that you can really focus on sensing the way in which your body moves to accommodate the breath and the way your breathing muscles are working for you. And you could do as many of those as you want to. If I was teaching this practice, I would say the sitting out version of the 3-part breath is quite an energizing practice. Doing this 3-part breath lying down is more restorative and more healing. But because we're still taking quite a deep breath, it may have an awakening effect on the mind. So it looks very relaxing, but it's not a last thing at night practice. But what you could do, you could make a simple adjustment there and just let go of the idea of making a great big deep breath in the 3 parts, and instead deploy the same sequence of movements of the body in that breath, but just imagine yourself breathing up and down the spine from the lying down position. And don't overdo the depth of the breathing that you're doing there. And that would be a much more calming and relaxing and getting ready for bed type breathing practice. Just one more thing to note, when I was lying down, I had placed the back of the head on the cushion. Most people will be more comfortable with that, and your airways will be more open in that position. Particularly watch out if you lie down on your back and the chin is higher than the forehead. You don't want the head in this position, so a support of the cushion will just bring everything back in line. So the back of the neck should feel long. Thank you for watching this video on 3-part breathing. I hope you enjoyed it and have a great yoga practice.